another episode, another stream, I should say, of Dear World Live. I'm so glad that you guys could join us here. I'm Nelofer Hidayat, the host of the show, the brand new offering brought to you from Doha Debates. This is our 1 month anniversary, if I can call it that. We've been on air 4 weeks. Each week we tackle a different aspect, different element of the coronavirus and the resultant lockdown due to the pandemic and what that's done to all of our lives. I'm so thankful to you for joining us, whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. You are more than welcome. Of course, we are all isolated wherever we are in the world, but we're isolated together, and there's some comfort in that. So I'm glad to have you here in my little flat in London. Those of you who are joining us now, good to have you. The show today is going to be a very exciting one, but I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the toll that this pandemic has taken on all of us, on those people who have lost their lives, on the effect it's having on hospitals and communities. The catastrophic public health element of it is something that we all think about. But on the show today, we're focusing on a separate issue. We want to understand how the coronavirus and the pandemic has affected the climate and climate change. That is what we are tackling on the show today, because whatever decisions we and the policymakers, legislators, politicians all make during this period is going to have a big impact on all of us after the coronavirus has left in the post-coronavirus world. So thank you for those of you who are joining us. You're slowly coming to the stream. I've got a bit of bright sunlight in my face there. I'm going to try and figure out how to get away from it. Maybe if I just turn that this way. It's all live. So as ever, we love to hear from you. Where are you? Where are you watching me from right now? Send me your comments, your questions and your thoughts. If you use that hashtag Dear World Live, you will be more readily able to get in touch with us. So if you are calling us, if you are watching us across the world, tell me where it is that you're watching from. Ask me your questions and any comments, and I will try and get as many of those into the next sort of half an hour with my guests as I possibly can. All right, so what is it that we're talking about? Let's have a little, I am going to actually need to move because I can barely see you guys at the moment. So bear with me as I move around here a little bit. It's all live. Look, you're getting a tour of my home. Sorry about this, guys. I'm not happy with things the way they are. Okay, so let's break things down then. We are going to be looking at the effect of the coronavirus and what it's doing to the climate. I want to first off start off with this image that we've got from the Himalayas. As you can see there, that is the view of the Himalayan mountains, crystal clear, beautiful. And you can see a view that for 3 decades, people in northern India haven't been able to see. Now, I want to tell you why. Why is it that we're getting such amazing views? And the best way to do that is to show you these images that NASA has got. Now, if you follow me from the top left, you can see the years 2016, 2017, 2018, 19, and 2020, just before the Indian lockdown. You see that bottom image there, the blue and white one? That was 1 week after the coronavirus lockdown happened in India. And you can see just how drastic that change and that difference is. Now, the story is being repeated elsewhere as well. So it's not just in Asia. If we go west to the Americas, to northeastern United States particularly, that is an image of air pollution in the United States before and after the lockdown. It's absolutely drastic. I mean, you can see just visually what it is that we're talking about. This pandemic and the resultant lockdown has caused big changes, and it reflects in the numbers as well. Now follow this with me, okay? When the world went into lockdown, our demand for energy also suddenly decreased by 3.8% in the first 3 months of 2020. It doesn't sound like a lot, but stick with me here. It's thought that if this reduced demand continues, then in all of 2020, that demand on energy could be reduced by 6%. That's the biggest decline in 70 years. Now, a lower demand on energy also means a lower levels of emissions of carbon dioxide. And it's expected that in 2020, that will plunge by up to 8%, right? And that would be the largest ever recorded fall of CO2 levels. So is this an opportunity for us, a wake-up call to change things for the better? Is this the climate silver lining? Well, I'm going to be joined by three very special guests to have this discussion with me. I'm going to be joined by Dr. Vandana Shiva. She is an author and an activist who spent the last 5 decades writing and campaigning for biodiversity, sustainable farming, sustainable agriculture, and the rights of farmers. And she has received countless honorary degrees. Honestly, Google it, there's a lot of them. But she's also the recipient of the Right Livelihood Award, which is regarded as the alternative Nobel Prize. Thank you for joining me. And Dr. Zeke Hausfather. He's a climate scientist and the director of climate and energy at the Breakthrough Institute in California. He's also a contributing author to the website Carbon Brief. I am also joined by a friend of the show. Obikeng Lesayani is a youth leader, an education advocate, and an activist. He's also a friend of the Doha Debates, appearing as a speaker on one of our previous shows about water scarcity in Cape Town. I am so grateful to all of you for joining me.
It's great to be here.
Thank you for having us, Nilüfer.
All right. And one thing that I'm really interested in is the fact that we're scattered all across the world. We've got Obikeng in South Africa, we've got Dr. Vandana in India, and Dr. Hausfather in America. So this is a truly global conversation, and one that I'm hoping you guys comment and send your questions through. And Dr. Shiva, let me just start with you. Your work is really, really interesting. And one of the things that you talk about specifically is this idea of oneness and not the 1%. So what does that mean? And I want to learn a little bit more about you. Why did you decide to get involved in climate change and activism specifically?
Well, I was following my dream of physics, and eventually it took me to understanding the foundations of quantum theory, because the classical mechanics, the Newtonian, Baconian mechanics, tells you everything is separate and everything is fixed and everything is inert and everything is dead. But quantum theory tells you everything is connected. That's oneness. My experience growing up in the forests of the Himalaya, I was born in the Himalaya, and my activism began when I saw a forest disappear. That's when I joined the movement that everyone should come to know about. It was called Chipko. It meant to hug. And the women said, these forests give us water. They give us air. They give us soil. And they are not timber mines. So we're going to hug them. And if you cut the tree, you'll have to kill us first. So we managed to stop logging. And I realized ordinary women knew that the forest and the water are connected, whereas the commercial interests saw the forest as a timber mine. That began my activist journey, but it also began my scientific journey of looking at quantum theory. So oneness is this world of interconnectedness. And I have spent all of my life, both as a scientist, and I'm still a scientist. I'm not a reductionist, mechanistic scientist, but that is not science, because it doesn't allow you to see the interconnectedness. And as an activist, when I see violation, when I see the violence, when I saw the violence in Punjab and the city of Bhopal in '84, I said, I must look at agriculture. And when I started to experience climate catastrophes, the receding of our glaciers in the Himalaya, our streams disappearing, droughts increasing, cyclones increasing in velocity, climate extremes coming more frequently, I decided to start looking at climate change linked to the biosphere. So I did a book in 2009 in the lead up to Copenhagen. It's called Soil, Not Oil. We need to return to our ecological interconnectedness with the biosphere and the living cycles. But I also realized at that time that agriculture as a system was missing. What was there was agriculture separately, land use separately. And I think that is the interesting part of the debate. I won't go into too much depth on it, that the skies might be looking clear just now, but the polluting gases are a very small part of the greenhouse gases.
And we will tackle that hopefully shortly as we get into this. I do love listening to you. You're very, very passionate, but I'd like to take the opportunity to perhaps bring in Dr. Hausfather here at this point. Now, I started the show, Dr. Hausfather, by running through what I think are clear silver linings when it comes to the climate crisis. you don't quite agree. In fact, you wrote an article called "There is no silver lining to COVID-19." Before we talk about your article and what you mean by that, can we throw up the tweet from Greta Thunberg that we had just moments ago? And this is a tweet that I'll read out. Greta Thunberg, of course, the activist that has brought all of our attention to climate change, says, there are people who honestly believe that the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere will go down, or that climate crisis impacts will reduce because our CO2 emissions have decreased. Then that really shows how society has failed to communicate even the most basic facts. What are we missing, Dr. Hausfather?
So the amount of carbon dioxide that remains in the atmosphere depends a lot more on the total emissions of humanity since the Industrial Revolution, rather than just the emissions in this year, 2020. And so even if we reduce emissions by 6 to 8% this year, it's not going to make much of a dent at all in atmospheric CO2. In fact, as long as our emissions are above zero or above close to zero, we'll keep having increasing levels of CO2 in the atmosphere, and we'll keep seeing worse effects of warming. And so we need to be cognizant that a single event like an economic shock in 2020 is not going to fundamentally change the world's trajectory. What we need to fundamentally change the world's trajectory is to change the way we generate energy to not release greenhouse gases at the same time. And that's a long-term investment, not a single brief shock.
So are you of the opinion that actually the images that I showed are not indicative of a long-term trend, that actually maybe I'm believing too much in wishful thinking?
I mean, if everyone in the world stays isolated in their homes for the rest of their lives, it would be a long-term trend. But to be honest, the human suffering that would entail would not be ideal. You know, I want to see clear skies like that over the Himalayas. I want to see clear air here in San Francisco. But to do that in a way that lasts is going to require changes in the way that we consume energy, not keeping everyone locked in their homes.
Okay. Dr. Shiva, you've talked a lot about this as well, about the way that actually this coronavirus is more than just one pandemic. You've said that we're going through 3 pandemics. Just bringing in a little bit of what Dr. Hausfather just said, what do you mean by that?
Well, you know, the 3 pandemics are, of course, one virus, but it is only one of the 300 we have unleashed by deforestation. And deforestation has a lot to do with climate change, not just by creating new epidemic diseases. Second is the shutdown has created a huge crisis of livelihood destruction, according to the International Labour Organization. Of the 3.3 working people who support the rest of humanity, 1.3 will lose their livelihoods. That means half of the people will lose their capacity to work, without which you don't have food. The hunger crisis is the 3rd pandemic. And according to the Food and World Food Organization, basically 300,000 will die daily because of starvation in the next 3 months if this shutdown continues. 130 million will face starvation, and 1 billion will be added to the billion who are already hungry. But I want to add to what Dr. Hausfather said. He said something extremely important, that it's the buildup and the stocks in the atmosphere that are huge. The jump in carbon dioxide, 280 to doubling, 413. Nitrous oxide, we forget that a big part of greenhouse gases are other greenhouse gases than CO2. This is the planetary boundary map where nitrogen coming from synthetic fertilizers, nitrous oxide, which is 300 times more damaging to the atmosphere and its ability to stabilize, that hasn't stopped. In fact, if we continue the poverty crisis, if we continue the livelihood destruction, and we continue to distribute chemically intensive, heavily processed food, we are going to add to the 50% greenhouse gases that are already contributed by an industrial globalized farming system. Let me share with you the IPCC data. It's 11 to 15 from agriculture production, which includes the nitrogen fertilizer, land use conversion, burning the Amazon for GMO soya, cutting down and burning the Indonesian forests for palm oil. That's all part of the food system. It's 15 to 18%. And then you have this huge processing and transport system and food miles and packaging and retailing. I work with tribals who are fighting bauxite mining, their sacred mountains. Where does all that packaging come from? It comes from mountains like that, where people lose livelihoods. That's 15 to 20%. And then the waste. I want to also add that while people who are looking at, I call it carbon reductionism, where you forget the methane, you forget the nitrous oxide, you forget the non-visible part of pollution from carbon, because we know that that gas is very polluting, but warming is not the only impact. This is what's happening in my region right now.
I can't read that.
Here are 2 kilos each, 2 kilograms. It has absolutely devastated agriculture. It has devastated community. Climate havoc is a better word than climate change. Climate change is very lulling.
Thank you, Dr. Shiva.
Floods, droughts, and hailstorms like that at harvesting season. That is something that's not going away because we've been making a mess of the atmosphere.
Can I bring in Dr. Zeke here at this point? Because you've raised some absolutely fundamental issues of what our future holds in store for us if we continue on the track that we have been on. Dr. Hausfather, just coming to you, that impassioned plea from Dr. Shiva, what does the hard data say? You're a hard data person. You look at the facts, the numbers and the statistics. What does that say? Does that corroborate a lot of what Vandana was saying?
So the world is certainly not on track to mitigate climate change effectively today. You know, our emissions continue to increase. And as she mentioned, it's carbon dioxide, it's methane, it's nitrous oxide, halocarbons. There's a whole range of polluting gases, of which CO2 is the biggest, but by far not the only gas to worry about. And so, yeah, trends are moving in the wrong direction. The world is increasing its emissions year over year, though thankfully at a slightly slower rate than we were 10 years ago. And while we're starting to see a couple examples of countries bending the curve of emissions and having sort of absolute reductions, there are far too few examples of that so far. And so the amount of action that we need to take to meet the Paris Agreement targets, to meet these sort of IPCC targets, is far larger than the amount of action we're taking today, even if, you know, there are some encouraging signs around falling prices of clean energy, falling emissions in some countries as they start shifting away from coal.
Okay, so that is a lot of information from our two very special guests there. Thank you both for contributing. I want to take a moment and go to your comments and your questions that you have been sending in. I want to say a special shout out to all of you watching from around the world. We've got people tuning in from Somalia, Kenya, from New York, from Zambia, Switzerland. You are all welcome. Thank you for joining us. Let's get to some, hopefully, of the questions. But before we do, just to let you know that we are Dear World Live right now. We're in the middle of a very interesting debate and discussion about how the coronavirus pandemic is going to affect our climate. I am joined by three very special guests, Dr. Vandana Shiva, who is an author and activist who spent the last 5 decades campaigning for biodiversity, for sustainable farming and agriculture against genetically modified organisms, and she's an impassioned activist as well. Dr. Zeke Hausfather as well joins us. He's a climate scientist and the director of Climate and Energy at the Breakthrough Institute in California. And my friend and contributor, Obikeng Lesayani, joins us from South Africa, where he is on lockdown. He is an education advocate and former Doha Debates speaker. Now, before I come to you, Obikeng, I want to put some questions out there that some of our viewers are just getting into. We've got one here from, where is this? There we go. Lucas's question is quite interesting. Lucas says, hello from Doha. Question for the panel. Does the coronavirus crisis present any new opportunities for climate action on the scale that we need? And then we've got another one here. I'm just going to read this comment out. Carlos says, hello, this topic is interesting for human beings. I'm worried about the effects of isolation and lockdown into reducing CO2 emissions. Unfortunately, my worry, he's worried that normality will come back, and we'll talk about that normality and what that might mean. I've got a question here from Bodhivita. Bodhivita says, my question to the guests, what do you think would be the most effective way to produce concrete action towards a more respecting and responsible approach to the earth? Absolutely fantastic questions. I love to hear from you guys wherever you're watching, YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. Send me your comments, your thoughts, and tell me where you're watching from. I'll feature as many of those in this debate as I can. Okay, let's go to Obi-King now in South Africa. Obi-King, those were some really interesting points that both of our guests have made. What do you think of the discussion so far? And you're an environmental activist yourself. What do you make of all of this?
Hi, Nalufa. So I think Dr. Shiva touched this. Touched on this quite nicely, which is how like interconnected and how independent sectors are. And the question about going back to the world being normal, I think is a very important one, because the question that then follows after that is thinking about whether our economy is climate friendly. And what we see is that most people don't believe it is, because if it took people being under lockdown to just have some of these minimal climate benefits, we then have to sit back and say, post-lockdowns, post-shutdowns of a lot of countries, how do we think about the economy and the role that it plays into the climate? And the sort of more pressing question for me that like emerges out of every single conversation that we've had so far is, how do we build an economically friendly, how do we construct our economy in a way that is climate friendly? Absolutely. And if we can't answer that, I don't see how we're going to go beyond having lockdown to be able to have some of these minimal climate benefits.
Obi-King, a lot of your comments and thoughts are echoed in the questions and comments we're getting over on Facebook, YouTube, and on Twitter. A lot of people concerned that actually the change that we need to make are going to be so vast that it will have an impact on economies, on jobs, on the way that people around the world make a living. All right, it's time to have everyone involved in this debate and discussion. Let's get everyone up on the screen and let's focus on the solutions. It's something, my dear guests, that our viewers really want to tackle. What does a post-corona world look like for climate change? Zeke, let me come to you first. And guys, if you have a question or a comment for each other, please feel free to jump in at this point. Now, a recent report found that even though the global demand for energy is plummeting, it really is going down, the demand for renewable energy is going up. In fact, it's the only one to grow in this way. Now, can we harness the power of this moment to create the change, as Obi-King was saying, that we need and maintain it in the post-corona world?
So what's happening with renewables right now is as demand reduces, energy generators are choosing to keep online the generation sources that are the cheapest to run. And those are by and large renewables, right? You know, it costs money to burn coal, it costs money to burn gas. It doesn't cost money once you've already built the wind turbines and solar panels to harness the sun. But the bigger issue is that, you know, obviously we all agree that what's happening right now is not a solution and not sustainable in terms of, you know, massive unemployment, job losses, people locked in their homes. And if past economic crises are any example, the world will probably go back to something close to normal in a year or two.
Yeah.
And the question is, how can we harness this moment to change the trajectory of the world going forward? Now, what I'm a little excited about is that in a lot of countries, there's a lot of political gridlock around these issues of climate change and energy investments and things. But this crisis creates an opportunity to spend money on public investments in a way that hasn't really been possible, particularly here in the United States, for a long time. And if we can take this moment to invest in recovery efforts that, yes, get people back to work, but also in ways that build out the infrastructure needed to decarbonize our economies, through high voltage electricity transmissions, through clean energy deployment, through electric vehicles, charging infrastructure, through all these different other areas of the economy, agriculture, that we can decarbonize through public investments. Now is a moment where we can do those sort of investments in a way we couldn't a year ago.
That's a fair point. Obi-King, you were nodding vigorously then. Do you agree with a lot of what's been said?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of it, essentially moving forward, is going to come to how strong is the political will and how strong is the human agency to make sure that we reimagine a slightly different political economy. Because I don't think without some level of economic reform, I think going back to normal probably means that those climate strike changes will probably just not happen.
But let me ask you this, Dr. Shiva, let me bring you in at this point. Political will, when it comes to the climate crisis, has been lacking on any continent, on any country in the world. They just don't want to because it's not expedient. So how can we, in the context of the coronavirus, what this pandemic has done, how can we make those changes that we need to?
Well, I'm from the land of Gandhi, and who also spent time in South Africa fighting racist laws and wrote his book on freedom in 1909. Political will doesn't have to be only in rulers. It has to be in us. And my work, when I realized what a big piece of the destruction, industrial globalized agriculture was, I've been anyway saving seeds. I've been working with peasants. We grow more food. And I realized that when you do ecological agriculture, you pull down the excess carbon dioxide and excess nitrous oxide from the atmosphere through the plants, through nitrogen fixing and photosynthesis, and put it back in the soil. When soil becomes more fertile, produces more food, you can address the hunger pandemic while you're addressing the climate pandemic. I would disagree, partly because I'm from the South. My quantum training and my ecological training, beyond the reductionist mechanistic mind, I think the word decarbonization is scientifically flawed. The living world is living carbon. There's dead carbon that was put by nature over 600 million years. She took all plants and animals and shellfish and turned it into the coal and the oil and the gas. We should get rid of dead carbon, but we have to increase living carbon to pull out the extra stocks from the atmosphere where there are greenhouse gases, but to also nourish the earth and reverse desertification, to address the hunger problem. We have to recarbonize living carbon, decarbonize dead carbon. And this language of decarbonization goes hand in hand with another illusion that's been created of dematerialization. Now that we'll have a digital world, let me quickly give you just two figures. One, cryptocurrency transaction takes as much energy as an entire household in North America. One transaction. One computer takes 539 pounds of fossil fuel, 48 pounds of chemicals, 1.5 tons of water to manufacture one computer and one monitor. We'd better start looking at the total ecological footprint of everything that's being proposed. And in the process, do an honest rejuvenation. And for me, what's central to it is the indigenous people, the third world peasants, women have to lead this transition because they have treaded lightly on this planet. And those who constantly give us new recipes for colonization have brought us to the current mess, and we can't allow them to create future messes.
Now, we've got a comment here, Dr. Shiva, I just want to keep you there, that says, get rid of oil, coal, and gas. Invest in eco-friendly alternatives. And that's from Jeanette Luna coming in there. I just wanted to highlight one thing. We had a recent documentary come out on Earth Day, produced by Michael Moore, directed by Jeff Gibbs. It's called Planet of the Humans, and it outlines a lot of what you're saying about the impact that these dead carbon industries are having on us. But the documentary, which you were in fact, you were one of the only people that came out of it looking good, if I might say. The documentary highlights how activism, how environmentalism has almost been hijacked by agribusiness and by these oil giants, and how a lot of the words that we associate with environmentalism, biofuel, biogas, sustainable energy production, they are, if anything, inaccurate and erroneous. So I have two questions for you. Firstly, if these dangerous chemicals are being packaged as our saviors, how do you as an activist avoid being pulled into these trappings of these new green fuels, as they're called? And secondly, is the documentary right? Has environmentalism and environmental activism been infiltrated by agribusiness, gas and oil?
Well, a lot of my friends are in the documentary, and I've worked with them on climate issues. But the ecological catastrophe and the ecological emergency we face is a biodiversity emergency, it's an extinction emergency, it's a desertification emergency, it's a water emergency. How do I deal with it? Well, I've never been tempted by money, and I've never believed that nature works on money. I've always recognized that life is the currency of life, food is the currency of life, people working in co-creation with the earth are the true alternatives. I have worked with more than 1 million peasants to build alternatives that are climate solutions, water solutions, food solutions, chronic disease solutions. And of course, we need little resources, and that's why I go around the world and bring the tiny bits of contribution to sustain that effort.
But the documentary specifically criticizes the way that environmentalists and the way that a lot of the environmental organizations that people like me give money to have been hijacked, have been appropriated. Do you think that that claim has some foundation?
Well, I think what that film is trying to bring our attention to is that a crisis created by a drive of industrial technologies and the drive of money making cannot be, those two drivers cannot be the solution. And they're basically asking for a full ecological footprint. And I, as an ecologist, I would totally support that. I do think that those who have worked in those silos feel it's a personal attack. I don't think it should be looked at an attack. It should be looked as an opportunity to create a broader movement that addresses the multiple crises we face, including the 3 pandemics I mentioned, but including extinction. We could, as humanity, be extinct in 100 years, according to IPCC, if we continue to do business as usual. And business as usual includes putting money, profits, and miracle solutions first, and continue to neglect nature's ecological processes and people's capacity to be innovative, to be resilient, to work in community.
Let's focus on those solutions. Let's bring back Obi-King and Zeke there. Dr. Hausfather, tell me very briefly, what do you think are the macro solutions, the kind of solutions that the politicians we vote in, the legislatures that write laws on our behalf, the regulators that police the industry, what should they be doing to make a difference? And then I'll go all the way around and ask for people's personal solutions. Dr. Zeke.
Sure. So I might disagree with Dr. Shiva a little bit on this front that, I don't think asking the world to give up computers, for example, is necessarily going to be an effective climate solution. There are benefits to modernity that we all enjoy, and there's billions of people around the world who aspire to have the same benefits. And I think it's going to be a really hard sell to fundamentally change our lives to give that up. And so I'm an optimist that we can figure out ways to make computers that don't involve producing a ton of carbon emissions in the process through clean technologies, through decarbonizing the way that we have industrial civilization. And we made a lot of progress on that. US coal emissions have dropped by 50%, most of that replaced by solar and wind. And despite very inaccurate claims in Michael Moore's documentary, they are much, much lower carbon than alternatives. Producing a solar turbine or solar panel or wind farm or nuclear reactor, for that matter, is about 20 times less carbon intensive per kilowatt hour it generates over its lifetime than coal. And that's including all of the mining, all of the processing of materials, all of the transportation, the decommissioning at end of life. A full life cycle accounting of clean energy suggests that it is much, much more better for the environment than the alternatives. And so I'm optimistic that we can invest in clean technologies, we can invest in electric vehicles, we can invest in public transit, we can invest in more sustainable agricultural production, we can reforest, we can have natural climate solutions that help suck carbon out of the air, and that all of these together can put us on a sustainable path to limiting warming to around 2 degrees or below.
Okay, thank you. Obi-King, there's a direct question that's been sent to you as well, a question actually that affects a lot of what you do and the work that you do. Nishad asks, the virus and the public lockdown have thrown the youth climate movement to the back seat. How can we pressure governments and businesses as gatherings are banned, how the movement can get back after the coronavirus pandemic? So how can the youth, from what I understand of that question, how can the youth climate movement, which was so powerful that you are a part of, how can that regenerate itself and move forward after the coronavirus pandemic?
Yeah, firstly, I think it's important to note that with the world going digital in the past several weeks and past several months, many of the strikes that have been physically convened have not been able to happen. But I think there's a world where you also have a chance to think about what are some of the digital technologies that you can leverage to be able to have a conversation with people that you publicly elected to represent you in politics or in any other form of governance. And I think this brings to a very important question that, yes, Dr. Shiva, nature does not depend on money, but the economy runs on money, and the economy affects nature. So there's a question that I think we need to really, really push governance quite a lot, which is something that I've always stuck by, that how do you push governance to ensure that all of these big corporates that practically go free are like held accountable, and also B, how do you ensure that conversations around climate change are just less complex, and they are a lot more in the mainstream? Because I think often, sometimes even when I'm listening to conversations like this, I keep on wondering, what do certain terms mean? Because it's not the type of language that you hear quite often. And I think part of what we have to do as young people who care about some of these issues is think about how do we make them much more simple, as well as bring in political will where like possible. And I think Alexandria in the House of Congress in the US, for me, has been the most powerful example of the power of publicly elected representatives that speak about climate change, particularly in the lens of what happens when there's a crisis that affects poor people, because that's something that we never speak about. That I'm like, often in these conversations also, there's a part where we need to check our privilege about just like being able to engage with the complexities of these issues. That I'm thinking to a woman that probably has to work at 9 to 5, wake up super early. These are very complex.
Why don't you ask Dr. Shiva? Dr. Shiva works with these sort of farmers that you talk of. Why don't you ask her directly?
Did you catch that, Dr. Shiva?
No. What did you ask?
Yeah, I think there's a question to be asked about the people that are at the back of the economy, essentially, the people that work the economy. How many of them actually have a chance to engage in these climate change conversations or like climate crisis conversations? Because in times of crisis, they're the most affected.
Yeah. So 3 things. The economy is not just the money economy and the market economy. Economy means the art of living. It means the management of the household. It's derived from the same word as ecology, oikos, the Greek word for our home. And all the research has shown that it's women who carry this economy, the peasants carry the economy, but our measures of economy, the GDP is measured on very false grounds. If you produce what you consume, you don't produce. So you knock out 90% of the economy of the world and make women's work invisible, make peasant work invisible. You ask, do they participate? Well, they're the victims of that cyclone in the Bay of Bengal. And they know much more about climate change. They might not use your language. They might not use the indicators that Dr. Hausfather uses. They might not say parts per billion, but they will talk about the disorder because of human pollution disrupting the capacity of the earth to manage her climate and weather systems. And we have a very deep concept because, in India, Rita is living the right way, the right livelihood, the dharma, to do the right thing for the earth, for community. Ritu, the right systems of change, the right cycles of the climate comes from that word. When I go in the villages, you should hear the wisdom of the people telling you what has gone wrong, exactly in terms of the hydrological cycle, in terms of the soil, in terms of the biosphere. They might not have the scientific indicators, but the processes they know very well. And I think if humanity has to have a future, we must stop rendering the majority invisible. And, Dr. Hausfather said, you can't expect people to change. But look at the number. Half of humanity has been trashed in this lockdown. The poor are expected to constantly sacrifice. And when it comes to the privilege, we say, as President Bush said in the lead up of 10 years after Rio, he said, our lifestyles are not negotiable. That's the problem. Lifestyles are not negotiable, but constantly the lives of the poor can be sacrificed.
I think Debunking and you, Dr. Shiva, probably agree that the people who suffer the consequences of climate change, the ones who have to bear the burden for those privileged, just like me, living in the global north, those people need to be taken into account in ways that they haven't been. So My last question is coming to you. Dr. Zeke, do you agree with this? Do you agree that this moment that we as a species, as humanity have never faced, this moment during this pandemic, can be used to look for solutions, to look for ways out of the climate crisis that we are all heading towards? Do you agree with Obiking and Dr. Shiva?
I really hope it can. What worries me is that dramatic changes in our behavior, locking down our entire countries, have only resulted in an 8% reduction in emissions. It might be 9% here in the US. And we need to get to 90% and eventually 100% to stop the world from warming. And it's hard to see how behavior changes alone are going to accomplish that. Now, it's certainly part of the solution, but I think we can't discount the role of technology going forward as well as changing the way we behave. And
a multifaceted approach, absolutely. We've got about 5 minutes left, and I want to do something that this is my absolute favorite part of the show. This is the bit where we go round in a circle, and we all talk about our what we can each do in our own way as individuals to try and make a difference. So my question to you, my guests, what is the one specific thing, a very specific thing, that you would tell people watching right now, all of you guys watching on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter? You're welcome here. What would you say to them? What can we all do to make the post-corona world a better one when it comes to climate change? And let's start with you, Dr. Zeke, and we'll go around.
Sure. So individual action is important, but at the end of the day, addressing climate in a systemic way involves policy. And so I think the most important thing people can do is get politically engaged on these issues. Vote, write your representatives, get out in the street and protest, make your voice heard, because to create system-wide change is not just going to require all of us, giving up our cars. It's going to require our policymakers getting serious about these issues.
Absolutely. Dr. Shiva, what can the wonderful people watching us right now, what can we all do to try and make the post-corona world a better one when it comes to climate change?
Well, my research has shown me and guided me to show that the globalized, industrialized, chemical-intensive, fossil fuel-intensive agriculture food model is giving us 50% of the greenhouse gases when you add all of it. Whereas organic and ecological and more local food systems can actually be a big solution, including pulling the stocks down. But organic food provides you all the micronutrients and trace elements to make you strong and healthy. It gives you more nourishing food. And what we are seeing in this period is while the poor have suffered, those who have a choice have shifted to organic. Shift to organic to heal the planet, heal the earth, and get you good food. Food is one place where the planet is not in conflict with us. Food is one place where the farmer and the consumer are not in competition with each other. Healthy eating is one planet with one health, whether it's climate or dealing with pandemics.
Very nice. I appreciate that, Dr. Shiva. Obiking, you get the last word.
Thank you so much. Every single time I just listen to Dr. Zeke Hausfather speak, I like how concise and very clear and very, very pragmatic, which is something that I think we often lose in conversation. I think what I would suggest, which is something that I try to do myself, I know it's not a big thing, but I recently bought a bike and I cycle quite a lot instead of taking Ubers or often taking a lot of public transport, which I feel that has a very terrible impact on the climate. So I try to do that. And lastly, I try to study crisis. So I think when you look at a lot of crises across the world, even right now, the corona crisis is a very good example of how change often happens in the world, is that in terms of crisis, people look at how different sectors engage with each other, and they try to streamline action from that. And I think if we are to in any way have a very profound impact in terms of climate change, we have to look at how do the different parts of the world in a normal world engage with climate change and begin to address it in a much more multifaceted way. And part of it means public representation, ensuring that they continues to be strong human agency. That's it.
Thank you. Obiking, you've got at least one person who approves of your use of a bicycle, which is an excellent validation of your point. Thank you to all of my guests, author and activist, Dr. Vandana Shiva, climate scientist, Dr. Zeke Hausfather, and a friend of Doha Debates, and dear wildlife, Obi King Lesayani. I appreciate you and your time. Say goodbye to the audience.
Bye.
Thank you.
Namaste. Thank you. Namaste. Thank you all. I just want to get, you guys have been so active in your comments and your questions, and I just want to get through a few more before we end the live stream. We've got a few comments coming in, people joining us from Nepal, people who are joining us from the United States. You're all welcome. Thank you so much for your comments and your questions. There was one comment that I found that I thought was absolutely brilliant. This is, I think, oh, here we go. I'm going to put it right up here. So Sabikun Naha Asmi says, change every behavior that is detrimental to our environment, from reducing the use of single-use plastic, reducing water usage and electricity, and use the social media platforms to not only raise your voice, but to also inspire green living. I'm very appreciative to you for your comments. Thank you for watching us here at Deal World Live. We are back every Tuesday, and next week we are going to be tackling the issue of mental health in the time of the coronavirus. Make sure you tune in then if you want to. And remember, you can always get in touch with us. If you want to be on the show, I'd love to have you. Just send us a quick email to connect@dohadebates.com. If you want to see the other of our Dear World Live shows, just like this one, about different aspects of the coronavirus, please log on to dohadebates.com/live, where you can watch the rest of the Dear World Live series. I just love this show. This really does give me an opportunity to connect with all of you. Remember that there is a lot more that the Doha Debates do. We have debates that you can watch that go out live. We've got lots of digital videos, and we make a podcast. Well, I make a podcast with my team. It's called Course Correction. If you log on to whatever podcast platform that you are on, just go straight in there and search for Course Correction. You'll be able to find us. And it's all about those different ways that you can make a difference and change for the better in the world that we all live in. So listen to the last 16 episodes. A brand new one will drop tomorrow, Wednesday. And I will be back next Tuesday. I'll see you then.